Thank you all for attending this working session.
Oh, we're not hearing yet.
He's on.
Making sure and check the volume.
Thank you all for attending this working session. This is our call to
Special
order.
meeting.
It's a special meeting. And I'm going to ask if there's an individual who would like to make a motion to approve the agenda.
I make a motion we approve the agenda for today.
I second that.
Motion's been made by Mr. Niebel, seconded by Mr. Kaiser to approve the agenda as written. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Agenda's approved. We have really one true item, discussion of the thought to adopt Holiday Island bylaws, at which point I'm going to be quiet and let some of the other nice, wonderful people sitting next to me talk.
I think these are great and they cover everything and I've looked over them. But however, I have a question. It seems like, and I could not pinpoint the date or anything, the previous commissioner board, and there was 3 of them, and I was at a meeting, and that's been, goodness, a year and a half ago or more, maybe 2 years ago.
Okay.
And that commission board at that particular time adopted the Holiday Island bylaws. I remember them saying that in the meeting. It's like, well, we're gonna follow Holiday Island like this, and they're like, approved, never done. And is that still standing, or I definitely remember it. I'm not crazy, so.
You want me to answer?
Yes.
I believe it was in the November of 21 meeting that the Holiday Island election model was approved.
Not
And-
these things.
No, but
Okay.
in this, you'll see some of the areas where I highlighted and said, this is where we'll insert our election model.
Yeah.
This is where we'll insert our employee benefits. Those are the things that we voted on, things that have just been voted on since I've been here.
Okay.
That I kind of made the notes and highlighted on what I printed out and gave to y'all today to know that those things we've addressed.
Okay.
But these are just additional bylaws and policies. And of course, these are going to cover meetings, which was a lot of the rules and proceedings of the election is how it starts. Operations of implementing the board. I think you'll notice on the first page, one of the things that I addressed is the rotation of the board. That is not something that has been discussed. It was not part of the Holiday Island election model because they have shorter terms, and so when you're elected for that position, you fill that position for that 1-year term, and then that's over. So for y'all to have 4-year terms, then there needs to be some sort of policy made about how you're either going to rotate those positions or address how that's going to work. That needs to be added to the election model. And because we're going to be having an election in 2024, I would think that would be a priority to address.
So are we also gonna adopt a muni code too with this as we go?
Well, what I did when I went back to Holiday Island today and did a little more research, the first section that I started for you was section 2, and I didn't want you to feel like I was leaving something out. So the muni code was just the beginning of what Holiday Island's bylaws are. And I'm going to tell you, they are so very precise. They have kept up with all of their dates when things were brought in. I'm sorry to say that Cherokee Village has not done that. The SID, previous SID, there's no book, there's no Bible, there's no one filing cabinet where everything is kept. It wasn't kept. And so in my opinion, adopting these policies, creating these bylaws, and going forward, this is how it needs to be done. When there's a change made, it needs to be listed. When there's a policy written, it needs to be included. You'll even notice that through the municipal code, throughout, they will leave sections open where you can add those additional policies into them. And those positions are reserved. So this is a lot to read, a lot to get started on. And I think that we have to take this a bite at a time, or we're going to become overwhelmed and we're not going to get it done. You have to wait until you get to make it a comment, Mr. Martin.
So, where do you want us to start with
Well,
Part
I think if
two.
you go to page 1, I think we need to have the conversation before the election, or we need to start talking about how the rotation of the seats is going to happen. We've got an election coming up, so I think that's important. I think if you go down to the next highlighted area, it talks about the succession of each other. That's how Holiday Islands was done. That's where our terminology will change. We'll insert what y'all decide to do on that. It says this is where the election model is inserted and voted on. That was from 11/2021. Kind of keep going back to page 4, section 2-35. It kind of talks about the implementation of the commissioners. You know, we need to have some clear rules of what the commissioners' responsibilities are and how SID and the commissioners work together. That needs to be something discussed and put in writing. I mean, it goes through, it gives us a great outline of how the meetings should be set up, what our agendas should look like. I mean, there's a lot to this, but I think we've got to pick some pieces of this and start the conversation, and then when we come back to our next meeting, you know, we're able to put this on our old business and start picking away at this.
So let's just start with paragraph,
Section 231.
yes, on page 1. Our rotation, and I read, but I didn't highlight it, what can and cannot happen, and I think that, you know, we're pretty comfortable with each other to talk about the rotation, but shoot, I wish I'd put a sticky note by it or something. It says who cannot succeed themselves and what we should do, and Ron, I bet you've got it circled, because you said you've read all these rules.
I can tell you from my personal experience when I've been on a board, and it was a nonprofit organization, but basically as the members came in, we came in at the lowest position, and each year we succeeded to the next position. And after the 4 years, we had filled all 4 positions, and new people came in behind us, but we always had someone that knew what was going on, you know, and kind of the way that our settlement was set up by the 3 elected one year and 2 elected another year, we won't get stuck like we have this time with 5 people who have no experience with the SID. You know, so we didn't come in with the knowledge of history like the next election will. We'll fill those 2 positions and they'll work with 3 people who've been here for 2 years. You know what I'm saying? So that will help that, but that we need to figure out how that rotation happens. What happens when a vacancy comes up? You know, that's something that's happened twice this year. In your first 12 months, 2 vacancies came up. So that rotated people up. We just need to make a rule about it, something that needs to be discussed.
So what did you start to say, Ron?
Well, had we not lost the chairman, I think this would have worked a whole lot better, because the rules that were set up for the election were very effective, very well done, and the election was very smooth. I thought for the most part, even though we would have liked to have had those 10,000 people vote and then put the dollar in the box so we could rebuild some of the pools, but you know, it worked well. And then the idea that we were going to have a rotation was very well identified as well. And the only reason why I haven't rotated out is because I fulfilled Tim's role, and now I'm fulfilling mine starting the 1st of May. So, you know, we didn't have a policy.
Right, right.
And I already tried to pay David so he would take my place, but he wouldn't.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't think that it's when you move into a position, you fill that position and then your own. I'm not sure how that works.
That's what I think.
Because there's 2 people you've kind of moved in. You know, Jim left and moved up to that spot, and then Tim left and moved up to that spot. And of course, that all happened pretty quickly, but I just don't know how that works. That's what this should all be about.
And
Making
that's
that
really,
policy, coming up with that
very convoluted in a lot of SIDs that I've looked at. Hot Springs is convoluted, that's one of their complaints. And Bella Vista has issues as well. Even though this works well, this has been the model that I used with Senator Payton, saying, hey, we need to have a team of individuals from other SIDs or perhaps the POAs that are out in Arkansas, so that we have Arkansas laws that really assist those organizations as opposed to fight them, which is what we found when we tried to replace Mr. Best at one point, and then Mr. Lee, where we had to go to Judge Moore, and would that take 4 months to get a reading?
Yeah.
So did Tim Lee's position expire in April of this year or April of next year?
April of this
24.
year, at which point he would become a commissioner at large.
Right.
And Mr. Nebel would then be the vice, and I would have been the chairman.
So you have fulfilled Tim's job, so you should go to at-large, and David should move up, and Joe should move
No.
up. Why?
No, because I did not get to fulfill my role as the vice.
But you can't succeed yourself.
Oh, I didn't think about that.
There,
And you
and-
know, when
and
you
that's what I'm-
originally were voted in, you weren't vice or chair.
Yeah.
You were secretary, because vice and chair were filled with Tim and Jim.
Right.
And when
Uh-huh.
one resigned, I
You
moved
moved
to
up,
vice.
yeah.
And then when the second person resigned, I moved in. So I haven't fulfilled a full year as the chairman at this moment in time. I've just fulfilled Mr. Lee's with the understanding that I
Mr.
couldn't
Lee's
pay.
position would be open for, not to move to the at-large, but he's up for election. Mr.
That is correct now.
Lee and
yes.
Tim were the next two election. Those are our two
Yeah.
positions for 2024. So he wouldn't have moved to at-large, he would have been finished.
In April of, well, just this past April, right. And he apologized to me because he said, I didn't want to do that to you, Ryan.
Well, so what you just said is that you rotated out in April of '23. You fulfilled your term as Tim Lee's job, and now the rotation should be, by common sense, David Nebel moves up, Joe Kaiser moves up, I move up, Tony Stallsmith moves up, and you go to at-large because we don't have an election until
Well-
April of 2024, but you aren't.
Those weren't the rules at the time.
Well, and here's my other thing, would be that, is that yours
But you
and
want to
Tony's
be the chairman
position,
anyway, don't you, Dave?
Yeah,
I'm sorry, what? I didn't
You
hear what
asked
you
me a
said.
question if I wanted to be the chairman.
Well, and I don't think any of us want the job, but we should establish some protocol. And if we're going to establish some protocol of you fulfilling your job and then moving on, you have fulfilled your job.
That's what we're doing with these, is
Yeah.
getting the protocol straight.
And I'm hunting where it says you won't succeed yourself, because I circled it in pencil.
yeah, I would say in the original model of the Holiday Island, it was not written or addressed. And I've got a copy of that if y'all want a copy of it too. This is what we wrote up for us.
Okay, I didn't bring that with me.
Just brought some extras.
So how do we establish chair, vice chair, secretary? I mean, do we vote on that as a bunch of commissioners, or does that just happen chance, or what? I mean,
Well, on the last election, because you two were appointed, we went by the number of votes. The
Well-
highest vote was a chair, second highest was assistant
right,
chair.
right. So that's the way it needs to go, by votes.
Right.
Right.
Well, and that was the way you were voted in. I mean,
Right,
Ron
right.
Page got the most
Right,
votes, then you, David, and then you, Joe,
Right.
and then I was appointed when
Right.
Mr. Best quit, and
Right.
Tony was appointed when Tim Lee quit.
Right.
Betsy, Did you write these up with the changes or did the lawyers?
For which one? For
The section 2 here.
this right here, anything that's highlighted
Right.
is what I had made the change to. The lawyers have not looked at this at all. Well, I won't say that. The lawyers have suggested that we
Right.
follow these bylaws, but I just printed them off, and if I highlighted it, I was inserting something. You'll notice on some of the other pages,
You've already got-
CVSID is put in there. If it's highlighted, it was something that I changed.
Okay.
So some
There
of
it
those,
is, right
anything that I made different from here, I made sure and highlighted so y'all would know that was adjusted, or it might say 4-year term where it is instead of 1-year term.
Okay, so what I've been looking for, it's highlighted on the first page there. Each person elected shall serve a term of 4 years. We've already made that decision. It's in the, that's in our election rules. With the understanding that no individual can succeed himself in any one position when his term of office, with the exception of a member at large. So this says, in my humble opinion, that your term has ended, Ron Page, and David Nebel runs up to your job, and Joe moves into David's job, and Tony and I stay at large.
No.
I missed one. We got
You're the secretary right
chairman.
now.
Well, I'm acting.
No, he's not.
Oh.
Joe
He's
is
at large.
I'm at large.
Oh, okay.
I'm at large.
Oh, Joe.
Joe is the secretary.
Oh, okay.
I mean,
Because what happened was is we moved everybody up when those 2
Yeah.
upper tier positions became available. So initially, Joe was at large, but when
Right.
the position, and David, you were at large initially, and then when Jim left, then Susan came in and she went to the at-large position. He went up a position, you went up a position, Ron went up. So I would think that the new people that come into an at-large position.
Right.
But if you rotate from chair to at-large, even if you do it next year, then in 24, that's not going to be the positions that are going to be open to fill. It's going to be an at-large position and a secretary position, because Ron would have gone back to the at-large and everyone would have moved up, correct?
That's what it sounds like.
When we started, that would have been correct.
Yeah.
But seeing how they retaliated, Jim left and Tim left, it threw us in a quandary.
But we really haven't had a quandary until today, because we've just been moving forward.
Well, once we adopt these, then it will become official.
But how do you want to do that? That's the question.
Where do you want to start? And
Theoretically,
Yeah,
from the beginning, when we got elected, this would be Ron's year as the chair. The next year would be my year as the chair. I like to speak with my hands.
theory,
Because
so,
Tim would have finished out.
and then Jim would have moved in, because he was the vice.
No, Jim, prior to that, was the chair.
Right? And
He
then
was
when
the chair, then
Tim moved up, and Jim held that vice chair position when y'all got voted in.
right.
So there was a secretary and 2 people at large. Ron was the secretary, you were the first at large, Joe was the second at large. That's what happened on election day.
Right.
And then the day that y'all were installed, Mr. Best quit, so immediately, y'all all moved
Everybody
up.
bumped up.
Joe Wagner quit.
No, Joe
No.
Wagner.
Joe Wagner was
No.
out. Jim Best
Jim
quit
Best.
in April. When we all got sworn in, he gave his resignation when that meeting started.
And so did Joe Wagner.
Joe Wagner
No,
was
he
already
was-
off.
He resigned before?
That was
The
part of
election?
the settlement. He
Oh,
had been
that's
on there
right.
for
Yeah,
7
yeah,
years.
yeah,
Mr. Martin, I see your hand up. Sorry, I don't have my glasses on, I just
I would
looked
like
up.
to correct you. This is a working meeting. That means that's what it is. You're not here
we're
to
working.
make any decisions.
But we're working.
That's right. And that's why we're here. We want to hear you working.
Okay.
Now you're working.
Special meeting is what we've called this, Mr. Martin. Our working meeting was the last one. This is what we're calling a special meeting to start the discussion of these bylaws. There'll be no voting on anything today, we're just discussing.
Well, may I make a suggestion since you want to talk? Why don't you adopt them and then maybe take a vote after it's adopted and set everybody where they're supposed to be and start fresh after you adopt the, whatever you're going to adopt. And I think it's great to take bylaws and stuff that have already been tried and true instead of trying to hammer out a whole new set of them. I think it's a wonderful idea that you guys are picking something that's already been out there and already been used.
Well,
Just altering them to what you need.
well, the other thing is we're working through these, and we are gonna have our lawyers proofread them and everything. So,
And I'm pretty sure that there won't be too much,
I found
Change.
quite a bit of language. at least.
well, but yeah, but like, well, there is some, but I would like to talk a little bit more about the rotation. We need to address the rotation and vacancies so that we can be ready. I mean, we got to start someplace. And the deal is, if Ron stays where he is for another year, then when our election comes next year, he immediately rotates. He goes down and everybody moves up, and he can either be re-elected as an at-large person.
No, he's not reelected. His election won't come up until 26.
26.
So Joe, Ron, and David will be, those three positions will open in 26, and in 24, it's going to be yours and Tony's position. Now, as we talk this out loud, it kind of, in my mind, I think that part of what Peter is saying, and part of what we're trying to do here, is that when this next election happens, that we have all our ducks in a row as to what positions are going to be open, how we're going to fill those positions, and how those vacancies go. What would be odd is if we rotate now, let's say, just for an example, let's say we rotated right now in the month of May, and everybody moves up and Ron goes down. Then next year when election time comes again, everybody would rotate again. So then the two open positions are not going to be two at-large positions, they're going to be a secretary and a vice chair. It's not going to make sense. We need to think a little bit past
That's why I said at that election, vote and put everybody in their spot.
and put them in their right spot so that the succession would work. I think that wasn't thought out well enough during this last election to put it in place right away, but that it needs to be.
So with that being said, Ron would be stay now until April of 24, right?
Right.
As chairman, and David is vice until April of 24?
Correct, yeah.
25 or 24?
24.
24, and then you move up.
To chair
Yeah.
in April of 24, Mr. Neal.
And Joe will,
Become the vice.
It says, whatever, it says chair, whatever you want to call it.
okay, you would move up and, okay, and so that Tony and I are still at large.
That makes the most sense to
You're
me.
gonna take 3 minutes comments, but most boards elect their own officers. There is not a set rotation, because sometimes you have people that do not want to serve or you do not believe are appropriate to serve. So as you're looking at your bylaws, look to see if you don't want to elect your own officers.
And would those officers hold those positions all 4 years?
1 year.
1 year. So what do you do if they have a 4-year
At the
term?
beginning of each term, how big the election happens.
Every year you
Someone
vote.
nominates somebody from the board and they go.
The four-year term doesn't have anything to do with the rotation of positions. It just means you've been elected as a commissioner for 4 years. And as the commission board, we can decide and vote our own people in. That's the way I understand. That's the way all the stuff I've ever served on, that's the way it's
Me
ever.
too.
Okay,
That's what school boards are.
okay.
So every
But
year.
I don't think
we-
it's bound by the election, is what I'm
Okay,
saying.
so every April, and we're just picking April because that was when that was when our election happened. Every April, the board will meet and decide amongst themselves who should be what position.
You nominate each month for each position.
For 1 year. We're good with 1 year.
The municipalities do it in January 1st, so you
Right.
go with your fiscal year. It's not, when your year starts as an SID, I don't know if it starts in January or if it starts in April.
It starts in January.
So you might want-
Financial year.
January,
For an elected official.
that way you got your
city,
year straight.
January is the day that they set up their house. So you reaffirm all the things that you want to reaffirm, and then you appoint the people or elect the people to whatever position you want to sit and fill.
But the one stipulation is the person cannot come, be chairman 1 year and be chairman the next year. That's what that one stipulation is basically saying.
It also says,
You can't follow through.
Not unless you guys change it.
But if you look at history, you'll see that the chairman rotated every year, even when we just had 3
Right.
people. Every single year it rotated out, and because the secretary moved to the vice, and then the vice moved to the chair, and the chair became the secretary, that's what they did for the 10 years that I went to SID meetings.
But you're all new now. Do
Right.
whatever you want.
I understand, that's what I'm saying, and that's how they operated, and that,
We're
Because
trying-
with the-
we're
with the
trying to set
president,
new
that
rules,
kind of
too.
is a little bit of a weird thing too, when two come in and five.
Okay.
I think it would be,
Penny had a,
What you're looking
Well,
at doing.
why don't we
I'm sorry,
for
so
the
we need-
3 minutes and kind of do it officially? Let everybody stand up and talk.
well, are we
Okay.
even to that position? We haven't even discussed it. And now we're getting confused by, I'm confused, so I'm confused, so.
So with this discussion, Ron, you would stay in your job until January if we decide we're going to make these January?
oh, Susan, only if I get a pay raise.
And what we're
Yes,
basically
ma'am,
saying
you're
is you can't be, you could be, but you theoretically are not going to be the chairman year after year after year after
No,
year.
well, that's what I'm
Unless
trying
we as a board say you're the chairman year after year after year. I think that there's somebody else deserves the pleasure and the
you
excitement of being the chairman of this board. Unless we're all Looney Tunes, I mean, anyway, I see it that way. I love the idea of selecting ourselves among ourselves, saying, okay, let's vote. We appoint
Let's put that in.
Dave, blah, blah. Let's put that in there.
January every
But the
year.
way we're set up now, I don't think we can do anything until our new year, which is in '24, right?
So January of '24, we'll
Well,
have this
or
meeting and
April,
decide who's
what's our
going to be
fiscal
what
year? I
position.
mean-
Is that good? Ron, how do you think about, I mean, we're not deciding today, but when we
Yeah.
have this meeting and have this discussion, do you think that'd be a good idea?
Whatever we think as a team works for me,
But-
because there are times that there are other people who would enjoy being the chairman. And I don't know that that may be true, but I know that in the past, when I worked with Mr. Wagner and Mr. Dennis and Mr. Pringer on different activities within SID, the only person that I saw who might not have done the chairman as a really interesting job was Mr. Ron Patterson. And he's a very nice guy, but Ron was very quiet, and Mr. Webb a lot of times actually ran the majority of the meeting during the time that Mr. Patterson was actually the chair.
Okay. So you're thinking that on the agenda next month, we can have this idea where we are going to rotate officers at our January meeting?
Correct.
Okay.
I think that makes
That makes sense to
logical
me.
sense. How much did you want, David?
Well, I mean, just based on the mess that we've had with resignations and then the election, and it's all new, it just makes more sense to me personally if we just do it and elect them in January of next year. But
So what I'm
How is
writing
that
down,
going to affect a person that's going to be elected in or voted in April?
They will be at large.
at large,
Okay.
they would have to be, yeah.
And
Until the next year when they're eligible to be voted
So
chair.
like the.
Which would mean in January, an at-large person that was elected in April could then become the chair based on what we're talking about.
Right,
Is
'cause
the
we-
only, to think about.
But we can appoint, or we can say, okay, we appoint Dave Nebel as our chair, and we could do that as a group, and then we all vote on it if he accepts. If he doesn't accept, then we gotta go back to the drawing board. But I think we could do that, and even after this, we get rid of this thing in January of '24, I think we can go back and do that, can we not?
But then what's gonna happen?
I don't like the seceding, that's confusing to me, the
Okay, but, all
succeeding
right,
thing.
how, with what Ron just said, right now, Tony Stallsmith and myself are at-large people.
Right,
I have just finished my first year as an at-large person. So I have 3 more years to go as an at-large person. Tony has got 3.
You only have,
Your position is gonna be ending in
Next
April
year.
of '24.
My at-large position will end and I am available for.
to be voted. You can
To
vote.
be
But
voted.
I'll have 2 more years after.
No.
no,
So let's say in
Your term
April of
expires in April of
'24,
22.
your term expires, and if you are voted back in,
Yeah.
then you would come in, your new term, voted in at large. Am I correct in what y'all are saying?
that's right.
So from this scenario, January of '24, the commissioners will meet and determine what positions they're going to be in for the year of '24. And whoever is voted in April of '24 will be the 2 at large. And then in January of '25, not an election year, all 5 of you will decide who's going to be in what positions for '25. Same thing will happen in '26 until April, when 3 positions will be open to be elected.
But
And it
when
will
we
be these
decide
3.
that, it's not based on ranking. In other words, it's based on the fact of,
Who
we all
wants
got
to do
together
what
and,
together.
yeah, and did it.
So
yeah.
you want to take out the succession part,
I
because
think-
one year you might volunteer to be the chair, and the next year you might be the secretary,
Right.
and then go back to the chair. Is that what you're saying? You wouldn't want
You-
that?
You can't run 2 chairs in a row, or
Right.
you can't run 2 secretaries in a row,
Right.
2 assistant chairs.
But now,
That's
are we
what
going
that
to,
states.
now, and I like that, but are we going to set term limits? Like,
Well,
you
the
can,
term limit's already set by the settlement, saying it's a 4-year term.
but if
Right.
can somebody get voted back in until the end of time?
I was reading that in here somewhere where it says that they be appointed according to vacancies occurring on the board shall be filled until the annual election by a majority vote of the remaining commissioners. At the annual election, the position shall be filled for the remainder of the expired term in accordance with ACA Law 1492-.
Is that the question you're asking?
That's
No, not exactly.
When you
I'm
say
saying-
if you can be a commissioner for 4 years, how many years can you be a commissioner? Can you serve
You mean chairman?
chair,
No, no.
commissioner?
No, as a commissioner.
4 years as a commissioner.
Yeah, but
When
so,
you're first
Can you be
elected,
reelected for 4 more, and 4 more, and 4 more?
If
Oh,
you ran,
there's no term limits.
if you ran again,
There's no term limits, that's what you're saying.
the term limits,
That's what she asked.
No, we
There's
haven't.
nothing in the lawsuit that said y'all can't be here till you die. All it said
We're
was-
wanting to vote on that, Mr. Gruger. That's
Yeah,
what we're
that's what
talking
we're
about.
yeah.
So,
Okay, so
My point that you were asking, Susan, is if I was elected for 4 years, and that would take me to 26, and I elected to ask to be a commissioner again and was elected to that position, then I could run a second 4 years, and if I really wanted to, I could do it until I turned 88 years of age. There's no limit in the number of times that an individual would be able to serve a 4-year term in the election.
I
At
think-
this time, if we need to have one, that's another discussion.
now, could we make a decision next month or when we have a regular meeting that you can serve for 8 years and then you have to take off 4 years or take off 8 years? Because I can see this piling up to turn back into a good old boy thing.
Not with people voting.
Well,
That's the other thing.
Well, now that's an interesting point you make, Susan, to me, because you know, when you looked at the rotation of the individuals in the former 3 commissioners, we did see evidence of what appeared to be good old boy with some of the other things that were going on. And I know that that was not the intention that Mr. Webb had. I've watched him battle with commissioners, and I've watched commissioners come back and say, no, this is our decision. And it was 2 against 1, and that was the thing that you would consider maybe a good old boy. So that was hard to watch and hard to,
Personally, I don't think it's become a good old boy system, because one, we're out in the open, we're not hiding anything. And people can see by our actions, what we're doing and everything, that we're trying to be honest, trying to be right up front and everything, and the people are the ones that elect us. So if they're seeing the job we're doing, either they like it or they don't, they're gonna vote you in or they're gonna vote you out. It's just that simple.
You know, the other thing too is that this is not a real popular position. Not like we've got a stand of people who want to sit in this position. So, you know, it may be in some cases that we would bury ourselves in a corner if we said you couldn't have a second term and then we couldn't find someone to run.
Well,
So
I'm
how
okay
about
with
we
the
something
second
to
term,
think
but a
about?
3rd and 4th term I think would be a little over the top. But the President of the United States can only serve 2 terms.
2 terms, right.
Certainly, we're not better than the President.
but senators can serve forever. And judges are appointed for life in the Supreme Court. So I don't see that as a good old boy issue from that view. However, limiting the amount of time, I mean, why not put an age limit? If you're over 65, you can't be a
We're
commissioner.
dead, yeah.
So-
I have read not only Holiday Islands, I've read Hot Springs, and I've read Bella Vistas. None of them have term limits
Okay.
on their commissioners. So I don't think we need term limits. I
Okay.
mean,
We can always add term limits.
if we have
If
to.
it
yeah.
becomes a problem. But it is a good discussion. It's all the things that we
And
need
it's,
to
it would
discuss.
be up to each individual commissioner. If you chose to run again, you could throw your name in the hat and be voted on again, or you could say, no, I don't want to do it again.
Yeah.
And then you wouldn't matter if you got voted or you can't get voted because you're
That's
not
right.
running. So
You wouldn't
you
accept
could,
the nomination.
right, you could eliminate your own term by ending it 4 years and deciding you didn't want to do it again.
Okay, well, that doesn't need to be discussed. But the discussion for voting officers in January for the coming year, and then in April, when we have elections, then that person just serves at large until January when the decision is made again. Is that that's the decision that we'll have to make at our next regularly scheduled meeting?
Sounds good.
Yeah, I think it needs to be talked about some more, but yeah.
What do you want to add to that, Ron?
No, I think you've pretty well summarized, Susan, what we were basically thinking, that January would be a great time. I look forward to retiring from the chairman position this coming January, if I last that long. And then we'll see where we go. So,
Okay. Place to start.
Maybe you might want to reconsider moving your election so it lines up at some particular moment in time in the future, so that everything hits at the same time, you won't have that 2-month gap.
You're going to need advice from your attorney on whether to
Yes.
vote in January or to vote in April when other people come in.
Because
Now, you'll do that before you vote on anything, you're going to get it cleared, so.
Correct.
thank you.
The attorney's got to read over this document anyway.
Did we get your point, Mr. Kruger?
Yeah, I was just saying,
Okay. Penny, did we get your point?
No.
I didn't think so.
All I was going to tell you is if you want to research that, research protocol. We just did this in council, and all it is you set protocol the first of the year that says we're going to meet at this time, we're going to do this, we're going to elect this, and it's done annually, so that you can tell people this is the protocol, how we run. It's done annually.
That's what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
Get this
But if
process
you
set up.
research even Arkansas stats, It will tell you what what different protocols are and how to set them up.
Thank you. At this point, it may be time for all of us to really go and review the documentation that Betsy has provided to us, even though we could probably be here till midnight reviewing all the documentation that were in front of us. I recommend that we end our session so that we have time to review all this documentation. Now, I've done it, I've gone through an enormous amount of the laws, and the
So
laws
has
that,
David, and so have I.
I'm sorry, then maybe I am out of line, but I know that Tony's going to want to do that. If he has, I don't know, and Joe has talked about wanting to do that, so that we're not confused, but
Well, could we at least start with a couple of things that we want to, we have some serious things that we need to discuss at the next regular meeting. And if we had some, I don't know how to get that out there.
well, you're talking about strictly the Holiday Island bylaws that need to be discussed, because that's the only other thing on the agenda.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to be point of order here, but
There's no point. I mean, there's not, but if you're ready to go, we can go.
Here would be just a suggestion on my part, is that we give this Holiday Island article that we had before us to our lawyers, have them review this. If it's great with them, have them get a big okay on it, send it back to us. If it's not, they can highlight or give us their suggested changes. And then we all get that. And then as we come back to our next meeting, it'll still be open for discussion. So we can discuss those items that the lawyers said we should omit or keep. Or if they loved it, that's great too. We could still discuss that. And we could table it and vote on it at the next meeting, or we could still, after the discussion, could still vote on it at the next meeting. We just can't vote on nothing today. We're just talking about it, so.
Right.
Betsy, I know you've talked to the lawyers about this. Like Joe says, have them review this.
They have. They have reviewed this, and they have given us their advice to adopt the Holiday Island bylaws. But the problem
Have they- no, have
is
they
that
reviewed
Holiday Island,
This document right here, have they?
yes,
this-
that-
there's
they're
a
the
lot
ones
of-
that sent me to this
Okay.
website
Well, if
and
they-
sent me these in the emails, and let me finish. Because, Holiday Island has trash pickup, they
Right,
have water.
Right.
Some of the things that are in these bylaws are not going to apply to us. Some of these things we've already adopted, like our election things. We've got employee bylaws that we've already gone through and adopted. So as you go through that I gave you, there's going to be some other things that you're going to have to vote on that are going to apply to us that are different from Holiday Island. But our attorneys have already advised, and it's their advice that these are the bylaws that we follow. In addition to, we've talked about lake rules,
Right.
we've talked about, some of those other things that will be added into this.
Here's the thing, I've been doing proofreading on that, and there's a lot of things in here that we're gonna adopt that still says Carroll County, that still says Holiday Island.
But do you want to pay the attorney to go through and change that to Sharp and Fulton County? No.
Well, then, we should have a document that has all the changes in it.
And I will be more than happy to type that document for you, but I'm not going to type 56 pages
No.
and just change HISID when we need to go in and determine what you want this to read. Then I'll retype it for you and we'll have that final review. But I mean, we're just going to have to look through this, and when it says HISID, know that that's going to be CVSID.
And for instance, it
Yeah.
says district manager,
That's-
and that's going to be the general manager, and where it says mayor, that's
Right.
going to be the commissioner.
Commissioner.
Right.
So those are, that
And I
kind
kind of tried to do that a little bit for you where I highlighted the
Yeah.
stuff to say, this is where we'll insert that stuff. Even as you go through it, where it said 1 year, I put in 4. The things that have already been determined, I've tried to do for you. but I don't want to go through and retype this whole document for us to rip it apart and retype it again. Does that make sense? Can we use this, the bigger one, and kind of make our notes and do our suggestions and then let me go from there?
Absolutely, absolutely.
So
Okay.
between now and our next regular meeting, can we, I mean, could we each like take a section of this, so, and take your
Well,
magic
I think
marker?
if we all read through it, because I'm sure somebody's
Okay.
gonna pick something up somebody else.
Okay.
Right.
So-
I agree.
But I think that at our next meeting, that we should, how's that gonna be worded? That vote to adopt these, and then we'll change them as we need to, vote to adopt the rules, and then like Betsy says, the lawyer says, we can adapt them, like some of the language, some of the nouns aren't correct.
And there's a lot of this that's like patterns of the meetings. I mean, this
Right.
should be our new agenda. A lot of this is just talking about the roll call, the reading of the minutes, the reports of the committees. A lot of that won't change,
Right.
other than
Right.
CVSID versus HISID. But you're going to get into more of the meat as you keep going through here with,
And some of
this
the,
talks about guest cards. How long your guest cards are. I mean, all of that is in here. These are all the little
Yeah.
holes that we've been arguing about and talking about with property owners for a year. It's just time to get it in writing, black and white, sign it off, and that's the law or the bylaw that we're going to follow.
And be able to publish it so that it's available to our community at
Just-
large. And it
Yes.
makes sense so that the folks come in, oh my gosh, there's so many rules. I've already heard that a few times.
yes. But like, if you've
These
been,
rules make sense.
and at the Holiday Island, when they've got a whole tab on their Holiday Island website, I mean, you could,
They are so
Well,
organized.
that's the same with
Well-
Hot Springs Village, is the same
Yeah.
way. all this stuff.
And listen, I gave each one of y'all this, and everybody in this room, I would suggest, go to Holiday Island's website. They did an audit of their golf course in 2022.
Yeah.
Very informative, and it applies to us. It does. It applies to us as our community. That is worth every dollar. I don't know what they paid him, but Tony kind of talked about doing an assessment of amenities. Here's what they did for their golf courses, and it brings a very bright light to what Cherokee Village has been stuck in and where we need to move forward.
Where do we find the bylaw? Because I could not find them on that website.
Resources, and it's
resources.
holidayisland.us, and then on the far right, it's going to say resources. On the bottom left, it'll pop up and say codes and regulations, and then it gives you the whole book where you'll be able to go through it.
200 and some pages.
Yeah, but if you'll click on the amenities, it's where this 2022 audit was. And it was just done in November or December, just 4 or 5 months ago. But I mean, it is extremely detailed down to what people should be paid for their positions. Very good information.
But
And it might not be
Vista has
information.
another one, because they're similar to us. They
Wow.
have a city and they have a SID at the same time. Now, before they incorporated their city, they waited until they had 25,000 residents. So that's kind of where we messed up a little bit, I think.
Well, and even their pricing, I mean, on one page that took us a whole pamphlet to get done, they've got their pricing set up.
Yeah.
And to compare to ours, oh my gosh. There's wording in here that explains why we're in this place.
People don't realize this last year has been a learning experience for all of
the
us.
learning curve's gone straight up.
Also,
We're trying to make it right, believe me.
also
Not
what you're-
everybody's gonna like it. It's not gonna be favorable to everybody, and especially some that have been here for a long time, because they're used to things being done a certain way, and change is hard. But if we're gonna thrive as a community, and we're gonna stay alive past all this junk that goes on with our neighbors, then we're gonna have to run this community like a business. And it's gonna have to be treated like a business and not the good old boy, which is, I know the words everybody wants to get away from, but that was what it was.
What, Ron?
I was going to suggest that as you go through the documentation, you'll also see a state law reference table. I've been through that in detail, looking at the statutes. Some of them will never apply to SID, but they could apply to the combination of Cherokee Village as a city and SID. Even though we don't want the two to be together, the laws that are governed by the state are really specific on activities with utilities and power and sewer and roads and things like that that are identified in what Holiday Island has identified in their documentation.
And one of the things I thought was amazing, and you probably, I know you saw it, was they've got a page that says the ordinance and when they adopted it and when they made changes to it. I thought that was pretty slick, so that you could always go, we need that, because if somebody asks me something, I need to be able to look it up so that Joe says the same thing and Ron says the same thing and David and Tony say the same thing, so that we don't have to all call Betsy and go, what did say you were asking that? Because she knows, but we all ought to have access to it. I mean, and and I don't think that any of this has happened by meanness or anything, except that we have had so many things going on that we haven't taken the time to make this a priority. And I just think we do. I think you think that too, but.
I think we have to watch our fees. I mean, I know these guys have got it figured out, but we also got to consider where they're regionally located at. And it's very close to Table Rock Lake and it's Beaver Lake. And there's a lot of money in the western part of the state that we do not experience here in the northeast part of the state. So we take that all into consideration too when we're looking at these new articles.
I agree.
One final thought that I have regarding what you said is I've engaged Senator John Payton to help go through the 2020 Arkansas Code Title 14, Subtitle 5, Improvement Districts generally, Suburban Improvement Districts generally, documentation. I've spent many hours with him already to say this is really broken for some things that had been in place based on what Hot Springs did, based on what Bella Vista did, based on what we're seeing, and as a group of SIDs and POAs, there needs to be more consistency across Arkansas and the laws that are governed by Arkansas. And that may or may not happen. I know the previous senator we had similar thoughts, but never was able to articulate and do anything with the legislature. And I know that Senator Payton has already initiated this within the group as a new senator. So I'm real happy about that. So this will help him immensely to take a look at the documentation that we're thinking about adopting as a team, plus the components that cities do that our laws need to be evaluated from his perspective. And he's come back with some ideas to me already. So just thinking, knocking around thoughts. Any other
Comments?
Thank you for your hard work.
Yes.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah, appreciate that.
Appreciate that.
Okay.
And we dearly appreciate those thoughts, because most of the time we might not get a very positive, other than how come we don't have, how come this has gone up? Yeah.
On the green bean aisle this morning at Walmart, somebody backed me up to the green beans. Because they know who I am. I don't know who they are. What about the pool?
Pray we're not ready.
Yeah.
Your thoughts on term limits? If we get a good commissioner, I'd like them to serve forever.
Thank you, I would too.
There's term limits that have hurt a lot of communities.
Well, but like Betsy said, I have a feeling that when it's election time comes up, there's going to be people that go, I've had enough. Or, I've had enough. So.
And it's sad that it's that way, because it used to be something that you were proud of. to be able to be a commissioner or a city councilman or somebody. But our community has become so broken and we're so pitted against each other and there's so much ugly that who wants to stand up so that the community can scrutinize you and, you know, verbally tear you down and it's just ridiculous. Who of their right mind would want to have?
Pick us, pick us, pick us.
On Cherokee Village, when it was done, the SID began, favored Mr. Cooper, because Mr. Cooper was the one that helped write the legislation. And even today, Cherokee Village is unique.
Right.
And until that lawsuit happened, we were very exclusive because we were the only SID that ran under certain parts of that law. We were the only unique one that did it. Everybody else went to a POA or other types of things, but we were under that special category.
And if you notice in the laws that have been written after our formation, we've been specifically excluded from those laws.
Yep.
Well, if you go back in time and you continue to do research, you'll find that the Attorney General, whose name is P.E.G, he was a governor at one time, I believe, and you'll find Senator Wagner from 2003 and Mr. P.E.G in 1995, and the information that was available in 1941, and I don't know of anybody in this room, with the exception of maybe Mr. Martin, who was around and voted, but all I know is there's a huge trail that is very convoluted, and that's the piece that I've taken to John Payton so we can go back and really look hard at how these operate. And I've done it myself because I wasn't sure if I was in FOA or not. I heard a motion to adjourn from Mr. Nebel. Is there a second?
Yes.
We have a second by Ms. Jett. All in favor?
All right.
Aye.
All opposed?